Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. We begin this session of our study circle. Uh, we'll start off with discussing a Quranic verse which I have titled as selflessness. The words are وَالَّذِينَ تَبَوَّأُوا الدَّارَ وَالْإِيمَانَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ يُحِبُّونَ مَنْ هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِمْ وَلَا يَجِدُونَ فِي صُدُورِهِمْ حَاجَّةً مِمَّا أُوتُوا وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And those who already have a place of residence and have deep faith love those who migrate to them and do not find any ill will in their hearts on what is being given to them, the migrants, and give them preference over themselves, even though they are in need. And those who have been protected from their own selfishness, it is they who will prosper. So these words and this verse is taken out from Surah Hashr, and the verse actually explains that the migrants or the Ansar who had migrated to Medina, they were welcomed open-heartedly by the by the by the Ansar of Medina. So the migrants who were the Muhajirun, they were taken with open arms and they were welcomed in a very affectionate way. And in spite of the fact that the Ansar of Medina, who were the were people to whom the Muhajirun had come, in spite of the fact they were in need and at times they were really pushed hard, but they really welcomed them. And the point that this verse makes is that وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, that they would prefer them to their own selves, even though they were in need. So we know that this brotherhood was established between the Ansar and Muhajirun in Medina, and the fundamental precept of this brotherhood was that the Ansar were actually so welcoming that they themselves needed, they were in want, but in spite of this, they gave preference to the needs of the Muhajirun or the migrants. So, setting up this example that we have to be always selfless in our undertakings. The more we are selfless, the more we come near to God and the more we purify our own souls. It's easy to always think of our own selves, and we normally do. And it's not even a bad thing to do that. But the thing is that whenever the situation arises, that there are instances in the society when there are people around you, or there would be certain events that have occurred in your own society in which they demand that you give preference to those around you. And this is something which is very coveted. And as we always discuss that normally a person is inclined towards his or her own self, and he or she always thinks of her own self or her own future, her own children, her own profession. But one thing that also needs her thinking and his thinking is that we have to look around us. We have to look at people who are in distress. We have to look at people who are in need. And the companions of the Prophet actually took lead in setting up an example of what selflessness is. It's like always thinking about others, not only in times of of need, when one is not in need, but also in times when one is really pressed hard. And this is something where a lot of people share their stories, and they have actually uh, brought up this subject that if you want to experience God, of course we cannot touch God, we cannot see Him, but we can feel and experience Him. And one of the ways to feel and experience Him is that when we become selfless and when we start giving other people what we have, our own share, then it often happens that the Almighty, when we ourselves are in need, He somehow opens up His treasures for us, and we ourselves are blessed so much that we become drenched with His mercy and His affection, and we realize that this is how the Almighty is repaying us for our own sacrifice and for our own selflessness. So, selflessness is a trait that is to be cherished. It is something which is really coveted, and I often think that there are so many real life instances of selflessness. For example, look at the firefighters around you. There are fires around us at times, and these firefighters have to risk their lives. They even get severely injured, and some of them even lose their lives just to save some other people. And what a tremendous thing they do. They don't even care about their own lives. To them, the life of other people is much more important. And what a beautiful lesson in selflessness. And then we have Mother Nature herself. Look at the way the various elements of Mother Nature, they actually nurture us. They don't live for themselves. The sun does not shine for itself. The moon does not glimmer for its own self. The seas and the water in the seas does not flow for its own self, or the breeze has no benefit for its own self. The shade which a tree provides is not no good for the tree itself. Every single element of nature is actually working for the benefit of the people who inhabit the earth. And in this way, they give this object lesson of selflessness. They tell us that the world around us is so selfless, it's always and always caring about us. And in a similar way, we too need to be selfless and very altruistic in our motives. And I think the biggest example of selflessness is found in every single home. The biggest example of selflessness is found around us. Each one of us can experience that selflessness, and that is the personality of the mother. And if you just look at how she behaves, how she actually conducts herself for her children, she'll, she will stay awake so that her children can sleep. She will actually go empty stomach so that her children can eat. She will sacrifice every single comfort of life so that her children get comfortable. And what a great thing this is, because this comes naturally out of her. We don't find any other relationship so beautifully poised and balanced that even if her children are rude to her, even if they are very disrespectful to her, even then, she is still an embodiment of selflessness. She is always thinking of her children, whatever the children may behave, in whatever form they might respond, in whatever way they might react. She is just a fountain from which this stream of selflessness gushes forth like a torrent. And of course, it teaches us that we have to transfer this same emotion to our own next generation, and of course, implement it in our own lives as well. And when we see these instances of selflessness around us, we are literally overjoyed, and our faith in humanity is restored. And we do think that how people live and the way they live for others is so exceptional that one really feels refreshed that this world is still a place to live in, that this world still have living examples in which we can really, really get inspired. Look at, for example, the recent life which was spent on this planet Earth by Mother Teresa. And look at Abdul Sattar Edi. And you'll find so many other examples, numerous examples around us, that people who lived and died for other people who did not care for their own selves, they abound. It's just a question of opening our eyes. Recently in Pakistan, we had Madam Ruth Fau, who spent so many years of her life in Pakistan. She was a German lady and she died last year. And the way she worked for the betterment of people is simply outstanding. So it's just a question of looking around us, and it's just a question of noticing how people behave in this way and how they bring us joy and eternal pleasure. So, with these words, viewers, let's move on to the next part of our study circle, and this is the Hadith verse of the day. This Hadith has been taken from the Al-Jami as-Sahih of Imam Muslim, and again, it relates to a very fundamental human issue. And just let me read out the narrative before you. It says, "An Abdullah ibn Umar anna Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam قال لا يحل للمؤمن أن يهجر أخاه فوق ثلاثة أيام." So Abdullah ibn Umar reported that God's messenger said, "It is not permissible for a Muslim to cut off his relations with his brother for more than 3 days." Of course, the male gender used here is just a figure of speech. Otherwise, it relates to every single person, whether the person is a man or a woman. And the beautiful advice which is given here is that at times we do get disenchanted from other people. At times we do get disgruntled. We do get very, very sad, and we feel sorrowful at the behavior of some of our peers. But look what the Prophet has advise and counsel us. He has not said that you cannot remain angry with your brother or your sister or with any one of your acquaintances. He actually concedes the fact that this can happen because human beings, after all, are an embodiment of emotions, and our emotions, because of the fact that we are attached to people, and hence the more we are attached to a person, the more we feel that person's wrath if he or she gets annoyed with us. So the Prophet has said that it's not permissible for a person to remain in seclusion or to cut off his relations with the person with another person for more than 3 days, giving us this leverage also and this latitude also that if we get angry, of course, then it should only be a temporary affair. And of course, the word three here is used in a figurative sense, which tells us that it should be as short as possible. Of course, it could be 2 days or 4 days, that doesn't matter. But we have to return to the person with whom we thought that we have just broken up. So it's like saying that the ties between humanity can never break. The ties between human beings must always remain intact. This bond of fraternity, this bond of humanity between us is everlasting. It can only be temporarily disconnected. But as far as our own life is concerned, we have to move back. We have to move on, in fact, and come back to the person that we perhaps want never to meet. And this, of course, needs a lot of generosity on a person's part who has been hurt. It needs a lot of magnanimity also. But then this is what is required. And remember, this could be the other way around as well. When we actually, there are other, when we ourselves in this spot of bother, we would expect also the same thing from our brother or our sister. So it's like always saying to ourselves that we must forget the past, we must forgo each other's mistakes as far as possible. And if the other person, of course, is apologetic, if he's sorry for his or her attitude, then this should not be a means of stopping us. Or if, of course, and if he is not even sorry, or he's not even uh, does not even realize the mistake he has done or she has done, then even then, on our part, we must not cut off our relations. We might not be in a very congenial relationship with the other person. We might not be able to resume that ultimate relationship, but at least we should be in a position that whenever we meet that person, we are able to present our greetings and salutations and just not turn away from that person. So, of course, having a good relationship with each other is a two-way process. But if the other person is not willing, then at least we have to express our emotions in which we tell the person that we are always willing, and if not from the depth of our hearts, at least from our outward bearing and our outward attitude, we just cannot reject the other person. So this is how strong a human bond has to be, and this is how strong the Quran has also told us that come what may, we must not break off our ties. And in fact, at many places, the Quran has chided people who break off their blood relations, especially. And يَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ أَن يُفْصَلَ بِهِ are the words. يَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ أَن يُفْصَلَ, that they break ties which the Almighty has bidden us to keep intact. And this often occurs, viewers, when we see our own families, if we look at our own friends. At times, our families are there are instances in our own families when two very close relations or relatives, they simply, because of some disenchantment from one another, because of some incident, they stop meeting each other, and this happens, and it really bears very badly and fares very badly. And of course, the children are also affected, and this also occurs between very close friends. But as the Prophet has advised, and as the Quran has actually said, "Innamal mu'minuna ikhwa," says that all believers, they are brothers to each other. They are tied in this bond of fraternal brotherhood, in which no one should actually break away from the other person for long. He or she has to come back. He or she has to repair that damage that has been done, so that we are able to present ourselves to the next generation as people who forgo and forget, who would like to move on in life, and therefore would not like to remain in seclusion or in a position of being in isolation with our other relations. So we now move on to the next part of our study circle, and this is The Bible verse of the day that we are going to study, this is actually taken from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter number 6, and verses 19 and 21. And I have titled it as Spending in Charity. So this is what Jesus tells us, or is reported to have told us. Make no store of wealth for yourselves on earth, where it may be turned to dust by worms and weather, and where thieves may come in by force and take it away. But make a store for yourselves in heaven, where it will not be turned to dust, and where thieves do not come in to take it away. For where your wealth is, there will your heart be. So such moving words and such beautiful words can only be spoken by a prophet, and see how effectively Prophet Jesus actually advises us and counsels us and tells us that the permanent reward that we can get for any spending is when we store that reward with the Almighty. Of course, when we spend something for our needs, when we something on our own self, this itself is a part of charity. But a bigger charity is when you think of others, when you spend on others, and look, the appeal that he has made, that make a store for yourselves in heaven, because in heaven things will remain as they are. They'll remain protected. In this world, our wealth can be stolen. In this world, our assets, as these verses say, they can be turned to dust by worms and weather. They can be turned to dust by worms and weather. They can be destroyed, and we can lose them. But if we invest them in the bank of God, if we invest them in the scheme of investment, which the Almighty is always calling us to do so, that will be an eternal store. And that will be the wealth that will actually come back to us. And that is how beautifully Jesus has put it, that where your wealth is, your heart is. So if your wealth is with God, your heart will be with God. And these words, they cannot be simply ignored. And the way they really move and it's in fact inspire us is it's so sublime. It's so ephemeral, I would say, that it's just a question of tuning our eyes and ears to the fact that spending in charity, spending on other people, and in fact, as we have just read the Quranic verse earlier on, which tells us to spend on others, even if we are in want, is another way. It's just another way of saying the same thing. And here, Jesus, we find him saying that store your wealth in places where neither worms nor weather can destroy, and where your wealth is, your heart will be. And if your wealth is with God, your heart will be with God. So this is an advice which, of course, really takes us to such realms of spending in charity, or such stages of spending in charity, that at times we ourselves are led, and we ourselves are actually guided to this such a lofty position in which we are always thinking of others, always trying to find out people in need. It's not just that we wait for people to ask us or to come to us, but we are on the lookout for people. We are always finding out people around us who may need our own sympathy and charity. And as we have been discussing, that charity is not just through money. That is perhaps the easiest form of charity. Charity is through giving your time, through giving your emotions, by being there for the person that you are acquainted to your friends, for example. Always being there for that person, always being there in a position to advise him and to counsel him and to calm him down or her down if the situation is such. So let's remember that spending in charity perhaps is the easiest form of charity. A more difficult charity is to give time to the person, is to think of that person, is to be in touch with that person who is in a spot of bother. So with these words, let's go on to the next part of our study circle. And this is the discussion topic, or the topic that we are going to discuss today, and that is issues faced today by Muslim youth. And just a couple of words that I'd like to say here, and before we open up our floor for discussion, that is that one of the biggest issues which our Muslim youth face today is this lack of purpose in life. One of the biggest things which keeps a person going and which keeps a person productive is to set a mission in life, set a target in life. And perhaps as parents and as adults, the biggest service that we can do to our children and to our grandchildren is to guide them very earlier on in their lives as to what their inner talent is, and then advise them to set their mission in life, target in life, in which is commensurate to the talent that they have. And we know that very centuries or earlier on, when Socrates had said, "Know thyself," he actually meant that we people must look inward and find out our own selves, look into our own selves, because each one of us, whether we are young or old, we are blessed with some talent or the other. Often that talent goes waste because we do not recognize it, and so therefore we are not able to contribute to the optimum in the society that we live. This can only be done if we discover that talent and then make that talent mission in life, to polish that talent, to bring it in line with our own personal inspiration. And the more we do it, the more productive it would be, because something that we already have in us, if we polish that and if we really look in a way that we are able to spend that and use that, we will be actually in a position to even produce something outstanding and as a contribution. So we have to set a mission in our life, and there can be no better a situation in which our passion or our mission becomes our profession. So if passion meets profession, profound results can be obtained. And if that is not possible, even then, our passion and our objective in life should become a hobby in our lives, and we should spend as much as we are able to, spend as much time as we are able to realize that objective in life. This realization or this achievement of our objective in life keeps us focused in life. It is one of the biggest antidotes to depression and a low feeling. Often we get sad and depressed because we don't have an aim in life, we don't have a target in life. If we have a target in life, if we have a mission in life, of course we will still get sad, but we will come out of our sorrow and our grief very soon, because we have a mission to achieve, we have a mission to accomplish. So let's become men and women of mission, men on mission and women on mission, who have a target in their life. And I would say that this is the biggest issue that we face today, especially the Muslim youth. And if we are able to channelize, and if we are able to direct our potentials and energies at an early time, this can really work wonders. And even if this is not possible, even then, whatever age we are in, it's never too late. We still can discover our inner potential and try our best to achieve whatever that potential leads us to. So with these words, we come to an end to this study circle. Dear viewers, I'm now going to unmute the mics of those who would like to ask a question. And let's now start unmuting. So I have Ms. Rafia Khwaja. So please unmute your mic.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Can you hear me? Can you hear
Hello.
me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Dr. Shehzad, you were very helpful. I asked you a question regarding gelatin, and because my grandchildren are eating sweets that have gelatin, and you said it was okay. So what I'm to understand that it is non-halal meat that is haram, but something made of the bones or skin for different purposes, they even use gelatin in medicine, that is okay. I just wanted to be clear.
You see, there can always be two opinions on this, and there are some people who still think that it is prohibited. As far as I'm concerned, I have 2 points to make in this. I say that, first of all, the Quran says that things which are consumed from animals which are forbidden and are of the nature of edibles, they stand as prohibited. So gelatin and things like that, they are not basically edibles in their own nature. They are basically enzymes, or they are chemical substances which help in digestion or other things. And so they are, in the first place, not even classified as edibles. They cannot be termed as meat or milk or anything which is of the nature of an edible. But the point can be made that since they are derived from things which are prohibited in themselves, then the second point comes in, and that is that the gelatin that you normally eat changes its chemical composition once it is derived from that animal and then used in a product which we eat or consume. So the chemical composition of that original product no longer remains the same. I have confirmed this from many people who are involved in the chemical industry. Only a couple of days ago, when I was in Boston, someone who belonged to this industry, he said that the gelatin, which is derived from even a pig or any other animal, is so drastically changed in its chemical composition that it cannot be regarded as the same compound as it was when it was derived from that animal.
Thank you so much, because I've got capsules which are filled in the gelatin, so I understand. My second question is that, about edibles. Is it okay to eat lobster and crab,
Right.
as food?
Mhm. So you see, the principle that we need to understand and apply ourselves is that as far as all types of seafood is concerned, if we, by analogy, know that the reason of prohibition for food which is obtained from land animals is that all animals which actually are carnivorous and they attack their prey and pounce upon their prey either with their claws or with their sharp teeth to actually destroy and kill them and then eat them. All such animals are prohibited because they are potentially they can potentially produce this savagery in the person himself or herself. So lions and tigers and things of such sort and animals of such sort are prohibited because of this reason. So all sea animals which can similarly which are similarly carnivorous and they actually consume their prey through pouncing upon them or eating upon them with their sharp claws. For example, one very blatant example is that of a shark. A shark meat, as you know, is a delicacy all over the world, but it will stand prohibited as far as Islamic principles are concerned because of the fact that it pounces upon its prey and it uses its large teeth incisors to actually tear it apart and then eat it. So you have to apply this on crabs and lobsters as well. Same principle that if a crab and a lobster is of such sort.
So, Dr. Shehzad, like my husband was saying, no, you can eat the fish and or anything that lives in the water, but because crabs also crawl onto the land, he said it's forbidden. So it
No,
gets very confusing for
yes.
someone
So
like me who
I
needs
understand.
guidance.
So let me give you the principle that this misconception has arisen because of a Quranic verse not being interpreted in its context. There is a Quranic verse which says that whatever is in the sea is halal. However, the full verse is halal for those people who are in Ihram. It actually relates to the fact that its prohibition or lack of prohibition relates to the conditions of Ihram. And in those days, because people would come by the sea and come by the land, so they were given this directive of consuming sea food as well. So this verse which says that seafood is halal, if you go and read it once again, you'll find out that it's not a general verse. It's not a verse which relates to me and you. It's a verse which relates to people who are pilgrims and who travel to Arabia to consume food. So, because of this verse not being interpreted in its context, the general meaning of this verse which has been gauged by people is that all seafood is halal. Whereas the verse actually, if you said, as I said, go back and read the verse in its context, it will tell you that all seafood is halal or haram, whatever is being told here, is related to people who are in Ihram, in the state of Ihram, and they're going for Hajj. It's not meant for common circumstances. So, if that is the true interpretation of the verse, then we are left nothing but with an analogy regarding food which we eat or consume on land. Because we do not eat that food or normally that those animals which pounce upon their prey and which are carnivorous. So on a similar basis, all such animals which are found in the sea shall also be deemed as prohibited.
So people on pilgrimage are not allowed to eat crabs and lobsters. Is that what I understand?
Please, could you repeat what you said?
You are saying that people who are on pilgrimage cannot eat
No, no. What I'm saying is that the verse of regarding seafood is only for those people who are pilgrims. As far as we are concerned, there is no verse in the Quran which tells us regarding the prohibition of seafood, except if by analogy, we draw an analogy from what we eat on land. So what I'm saying is that the worst of seafood, which is generally thought to be a worst for seafood, has nothing to do with seafood. Now, the other thing is that the principle that we are left now is, if that verse does not exist for non-pilgrims, is that we as individuals need to analyze that what are the forms of land food that are prohibited. So we come to the conclusion those forms of land food are prohibited, which are potentially come from animals which pounce upon their prey and they kill them in a vicious manner and eat their food. So if there are similar animals in the sea, like the ones that we have find on land, so those were the ones that will be prohibited. And I gave the example of shark. So what you can ask yourself is, if lobsters and crabs, they are of the same sort, which pounce upon their prey, which have claws and which eat meat by just tearing apart their prey, then they too will be stand prohibited. But as far as I know, this is not the case with lobsters and crabs. They are not such, they cannot be classified as such. So my submission to you actually was to give you the principle. Instead of just judging between lobsters and crabs, I was trying to actually elaborate the principle which makes some particular seafood as allowed or as prohibited. I was just giving you this principle.
I apologize, but I just want to understand. So when the pilgrims were going on pilgrimage, that is the time they were not supposed to eat the seafood.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
They were told that certain things are allowed or not allowed. As I said, that particular verse relates specifically to pilgrims, and it does not really relate to us in any case, in any situation. So that particular verse, which is generally invoked, as your husband also said, that seafood is okay, and because crabsters and lobsters, crabs and lobsters, they crawl upon the land, and so they become land animals, and hence the prohibition of seafood or sea animals is no longer there. I was just addressing that point. See, what happens is that because of the verse, our scholars think that whether it's a shark, whether it's a whale, whether it's any sea animal, it is absolutely allowed, expressly allowed. So I was telling you that that particular verse has a context. It does not relate to us. It relates to pilgrims only. You can just go and study that verse and you'll find out. So if there is no such verse, then we need to understand that the basis of prohibition, if there is one, exists outside that verse. And then I said that the basis of that prohibition is the same as the one found for land animals. And that is, if any animal is of the nature of, of someone who pounces upon the prey and actually tears apart it and eats its meat, then that is something that we have prohibited on land. That's, for example, on very similar basis, we have prohibited tigers and lions and all sorts of carnivorous animals. So a similar carnivorous animal, if found in sea, would also stand prohibited. And I gave the example of shark. So generally, shark meat is not regarded as prohibited because people say that everything which comes out of the sea is allowed. Whereas in our principle, everything comes out of the sea is of course allowed, unless it is of the nature of an animal which tears apart its prey and pounces on it and actually has this savage way of consuming its prey.
thank you so much, Dr. Shehzad. I appreciate your guidance.
Okay, so I can now see. It's Miss Haroon. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I wanted to go back to the verse that you said today regarding breaking relations. How do you a situation when it's your parent?
When you're a parent or when you are facing a parent?
When you are facing a
Right.
a relation with a
Mhm.
that is very hard and tough, and they
Right.
have their trust.
Right. So you're referring to a parent who is either very harsh or very hard, and it's very difficult to even maintain that normal relationship with such a parent because of the ultimate attitude that they have adopted. So the guidance which the Quran gives is that even in such situations, anything which relates to their rights, for example, if they've grown old and they are dependent on you, even if they have behaved extremely badly. Let me give you an example. This is an example which is a real life example. In fact, there are two examples which I, at the moment, am dealing with a couple of young men and women. So both the example is that their father is guilty of incest with one of the daughters, and this is, of course, something more grave simply cannot be imagined. And if this is the case, and the daughter is not even willing to see the father or even meet him, this is an exceptional situation, and it may be justified because, after all, such a heinous act has been committed that even then, even in this situation, a daughter would not like to face his father. But other than that, I would say that except if these conditions are extremely of such horrific nature as I've just described, lesser than those things, if parents have been harsh to you or they have not actually cared for you enough, there could be a number of scenarios. So it depends. It should be in your heart that I am still someone who who owes a lot to my parents because of the fact that they have been so kind and affectionate to me, and they brought me up, and the way they have actually sacrificed, at least they did when you were growing up. So I need to repay them. So what is required is you might not be devoted to them in your heart. You might not have that feeling of love for them in your heart. But as far as your outward rights and responsibilities are concerned, particularly if they are dependent on you, you should still try your best to maintain that particular equilibrium in which you are dispensing with their rights. Of course, what you can be given exemption from is not to have a very loving relationship from your heart, because things come out of your heart, and when parents are very bad and they've really mishandled and misbehaved, then it's extremely difficult for that to happen. But it's just a question of reminding ourselves that this is what they are doing today. But when I was growing up, cared for me, the way they nurtured for me, still something which is something that I cannot deny. So I've just given you this answer in principle, because if you have a specific case, you could always personally discuss it with me. But what I can say from that is that extremely untoward situations would be an exception. But other than that, we have to try our best to at least maintain a good relationship, if not an ideal one, or even a working relationship with them, so that we are not all people who are ungrateful.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Jazakallah.
So I have another question, right? Dr. Uzma, that's so. I've unmuted your mic. Please go ahead. If you're on the phone, I think you cannot be unmuted. So this software says that attendees who are on the phone, they cannot be unmuted unless they enter their PIN. So your PIN has been sent to you. So if you just type that PIN number, you'll be unmuted. I cannot unmute you from here. It seems that, so what you can do is that perhaps if you're still listening to me and my voice is coming over to you, you can either send your question via email or through other means, because at the moment I think that, let me try again. So it says that audio PIN has been sent to you, which you can type and then unmute yourself. Okay, I think that it's better that if you have that question, you can kindly send it to me through other means, because from here we are not being able to unmute you unless you are okay. I think.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Go ahead.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, I dialed in through the phone.
It's
so
okay.
I have a couple of questions, but I'll just select two for this session. The first question relates directly to the topic of today, And there's a lot of emphasis on charity in all religions, and certainly in Islam. What's the thing which I often think about is, that charity towards each other is totally understandable. But what I find there's not a whole lot of emphasis is on charity towards or kindness towards animals per se. And the reason I bring this up is because I'm currently doing my estate planning, and there's a certain portion of my estate which I want to be given to for the care of animals here in the United States. So how does that figure in the broader concept of charity in our religion? And would love to get your thoughts on that. So that's question number one.
So as far as being charitable and being kind to animals is concerned, it's such a commendable and laudable thing that the Prophet himself is reported to have praised a lot. And although the Quran does not directly mention it, but by just telling us that every single act of charity and kindness which is done towards other people and other life forms is acceptable and is very commendable. So it is subsumed in that as well. So I would say that if you are doing something for the well-being of animals, anything which you do is extremely noble. And if you do something of this sort, it will be extremely rewarding to you as well, because here you find individuals or life forms which are not able to live for their own selves. They are heavily dependent on human beings and the environment in which they live. So if you do something for their betterment, if you do something for their cause, it's extremely laudable. As I said, it will be extremely rewarding. So although the Quran does not directly mention it, but as we know that there are a lot of good and pious deeds. The Quran just refers to by saying that all good deeds should be done by individuals. So we can see that everything which is for the benefit of those around us, even for that matter, it could be even true for the plants, for the plant life, because plants equally are, although they are not those living organisms the way animals and human beings are, but still they are have a certain life in them. So everything which is done for the betterment of life around us is something which is praiseworthy, because these life forms have been created by the Almighty Himself, and they have been created for the benefit of human beings. Animals have been created, a lot of them have been created for human beings, and similarly it's plant life. So whatever is done to preserve them, to, for example, set up rehabilitation centers for them or centers which are able to serve them is something, in my humble opinion, a very, very noble gesture.
Okay, thank you. And my other question has to do with one of the words that appears in the Quran, and I'm forgetting the para, but I think it's towards the end of the Quran, that maybe the 23rd or the 24th para. It has to do with the concept of hijab addressing directly the Prophet's wife. And then it goes on to say that Muslim women should also cover themselves in the context of should draw the chador up on the faces so that the faces are not seen. So could you explain that, because it was contextual at that time? What's the relevance of that particular verse for us now?
Right. So that particular verse belongs to Surah Ahzab, which is the 33rd Surah of the Quran. And this is a surah that I advise you to look it up. I can send you some links to read its tafsir, the relevant portion. But very briefly, let me just explain that this was a time in Medina when the hypocrites had started a very willful campaign to nullify the life, especially the personal life of the Prophet, the household life of the Prophet, and they would just barge into the houses of the mothers of the faithful, the Ummahatul Mu'mineen, because there were no doors in those times, and the curtains would be hung at the door entrances, or the house entrances, and they would just barge in and say they are maybe need some water or any small thing, and the purpose would be actually to scandalize their lives, to catch them unaware, and then go out and say that this is how I spoke to the lady, and this is how she was so gentle and kind to me. So this was a time in Medina when, because of the fact that Islam was spreading very fast, the hypocrites especially had no idea how to counter Islam, because they thought that this is something which is now getting out of hand. So this is a ploy that they actually employed, and they said that by actually bringing the house of the Prophet into disrepute, they can lower his status in the eyes of the common man. And so they started this wileful campaign, as I said. And it was in these circumstances, there are some other details also which I'm skipping in, which you can read, is that our mothers of the believers, they were told, and of the believing women as well, that when you go out, because in those times, women and men, houses did not have attached bathrooms. So men and women often used to go out early in the early morning or in other parts of the day to relieve themselves in the lands or the jungle nearby. And it was in these circumstances when these hypocrites would follow them and try to actually create a situation. And when they would be actually warned that what are they doing, they're trying to tease or harass women who are of the household of the Prophet and of the believers. They would just make up this excuse that, oh, we didn't realize that we were such people. We thought that we were following a slave lady. So in order to make them distinct from slave ladies, because slave women of those times did not used to cover their heads, or they dressed up in a different way. So to make them distinct, to make the women of the household of the Prophet and of the believers distinct, they were told that they should lower their coverings on themselves, so that these hypocrites are not afforded an excuse, and they don't tell us later on that they were just trying to follow a slave lady, because she would be dressed differently. So this was just a mark of the ladies of the household of the Prophet and of the believers given to them, so that these hypocrites don't get this excuse to say. And this is why the Quranic verses right next to this says, "Zalika adna an yu'rafna fala yuzain," which means that this is because this directive has been given so that they are recognized as decent ladies, fala yuzain, and then they are not teased and they are not harassed. So this situation, as I said, was specific to Medina. It was specific to the household of the Prophet and to the household of the believers, because of the fact that this is what the hypocrites would be doing. And as a precautionary measure, as a preemptive measure, this is what the Almighty told. He could have given some other measures, but the Almighty thought that if more time is given to the hypocrites, it might well be that they could be reformed, or if not reformed, at least they could be exposed. So the point I'm making is that the Almighty could have actually warned the hypocrites themselves, or given such other measures as would not affect the house of the wives of the Prophet or the believers. But the Almighty deemed it much more wise to give them more time, and instead of tightening them, He actually tightened the household of the believers and the Prophet's wives, that they should be more careful and not afford them this chance of any harassment. So this whole scenario in Surah Azab has a specific ring to it. It has a specific context. It does not relate in any way to the situation that we have today. As far as today is concerned, if you would like to study what are the dress code or directives which women or men have to observe, then the right place for that is Surah Nur, and you can find there that men and women there have been actually given the same directives, except one which is additional for women. Men have been told to lower their gaze, to guard their gaze from taking undue liberty, and so have been women. And then they both have been told to dress in a decent way, so that their body is not visible even after the dress they are wearing. And these are the two directives which are actually given to men and women collectively. One additional directive which is given to women is that when they are made up and they have made up and they have embellished themselves, then they should cover their head as well. And if they've not made up, if they've not embellished their head, it's just comb their hair in an ordinary way, then covering the head is not a mandatory thing. So I was just explaining this last part as a consequential question because Surah Azab verses, which I have previously explained, have nothing to do with hijab or nothing to do with parda as is generally construed. Whatever is to be understood regarding this particular area is to be taken from Surah Nur, which I just briefly explained.
Okay, thank you. And my one more question I have is, what is the concept of mutawatir in Quran?
So tawatur is a term. It's not a religious term. It's a term of history and the science of history, which means that something is transmitted in such a all-pervasive way that there is absolutely no chance of anything which is not there to be conveyed. I mean, it always affords us certitude of whatever thing is being transmitted. For example, if thousands and thousands of people say that they saw a fire at a particular place, then the probability that that fire actually took place, it is virtually 100%. However, for example, if a couple of people report something, then there could always be this situation in which perhaps the people who transmitted from them actually were not able to understand. So when thousands and thousands transmit to thousands and thousands, and they go on to thousands and thousands, so on and so forth, this is how all that established history is transmitted. This is how we come to know that Jesus was a prophet. This is how we come to know that, for example, there was a certain person in history who was called Socrates. So when generations after generations, they transmit something such that transmission is transmitted again to the next generation and to the next generation. This is what is called tawatur, and in English it can be called perpetuation or perpetual transfer of knowledge in a way that there is absolutely zero chance that the knowledge itself which is being transferred is false or is not certain. So it's a certain means of transfer of knowledge in which whatever is being transferred, you cannot doubt its provenance or its certitude. In contrast, there is this thing called the ahad, which means a couple of people transmit a couple of people to a couple of people. Thus, for example, tawatur is something through which the Quran was transferred one after the other generation. However, an opposite thing would be that a few people report from a few people, and that is the example of micro-history, or, for example, the hadith that we generally come across.
Okay, thank you. And last question I have has to do with the concept of tasbih. And that appears in the Quran, I mean, at least in the Urdu translation. Is the concept of tasbih to be taken literally as the tasbih, the using of the rosary beads? Is that what is implied, or?
No, actually, in the Quran, the tasbih means to glorify the Almighty. It has nothing to do with the beads. That is something that we have invented. They're all man-made things. In the Quran, the tasbih means to glorify the Almighty, to actually express His greatness and glory and exalt Him. Like, for example, when we say Subhanallah, or when we look at some of His outstanding feats, we have this inner feeling that this is a manifestation of immense power and greatness from a being. And when we say that He is someone who has all positive attributes and He has no negative attribute, this is what is called tasbih. So the Quranic word which comes out of it is sabbih, to do tasbih, which means to praise and to glorify the Almighty. And it has nothing to do with these beats that we often count.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think that there are no more questions. So with that, we come to an end to this study session. Inshallah, we'll meet again next week, same time. Until then, it is Khuda.